Good morning again to you, brothers and sisters. Once again, Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us for this Advent season again. So in today's Advent devotional, we're looking at the purposes for Jesus' coming, which are talked about in Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 to 5. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. Now, there are, of course, many purposes to marvel at when it comes to the incarnation of Christ. Maybe for all of eternity, we'll be talking about those. But two words in this passage summarize the two of those purposes. One is redemption, and the other, adoption. Let's start with adoption. Several years ago now, my family and I lived in Russia as missionaries. Occasionally, we would get opportunities to go to Russian orphanages in our town of Krasnoyarsk. There were Christmas programs where we got to be a part of distributing Operation Christmas Child boxes, and there were times when groups from the States would come to do work at the orphanages, and we would get to participate with them, maybe in a construction project, maybe just spending time with those orphans in the orphanages. So we got to know the condition of Russian orphanages to some degree from that angle. There were also several occasions where we met American couples who were coming to our city in Russia to adopt a child from an orphanage. Many times these couples had never been out of the country before, let alone to the middle of Siberia. They often looked disoriented and overwhelmed, and there was good reason for that. Not only that, but they were about to try to navigate a complicated process in a foreign language and in a foreign culture. We were glad to be of help to them when we could, but that wasn't always possible for us. So as I think about adoption, I think about that through the lens of those experiences. I try to imagine what it would be like for a young child from a Russian orphanage to be taken in by a family from a distant land. They would have no idea about what to expect when they left their country. The process of learning a new culture, a new language, living in a new family, that is a lot of major adjustment for everyone involved. For many of them, it would be overwhelming. And in fact, when we were home on home service, we often had people wanting to introduce us to the children that they had adopted from Russia. They wanted to see if we could make some kind of connection with these kids because we would know the language and the culture a bit. For some of them, the process of adoption and assimilation was slow and painful and unpredictable. I know that is the case for believers as well. The fact of adoption is wonderful, but the adjustment to life in God's family isn't always easy. We call that process sanctification, and although it is marvelous in itself, it also has many challenges. I also think about the adoption process from the point of view of the parents. There is immense financial and emotional expense on their end. The process is often a roller coaster of emotions, and each case has unique challenges to it as well. The thing that keeps them going through the process is a deep love, really for someone they barely know. Now, I know the analogies break down. I know that the adoption that we experience in God's family is not exactly the same as that which is experienced in families around the world today. And certainly it breaks down at the point where God has no confusion or uncertainty in the process of his adoption of us. He knows exactly what he's getting into. And he is certainly never overwhelmed by anything that he encounters in this world. But there is an immense price nonetheless. Actually, one which I have never seen a parallel to in the human adoption process. He had to send his son on a rescue mission for us, which he knew would cost him his life. That's where the other word comes in, redemption. In most human adoptions, there is a great expense involved in time and money. But with our adoption into God's family, a redemption price had to be paid as well. I don't know that there is any appropriate parallel or analogy for us in redemption. The value of the one and only Son of God is beyond any kind of measure, even by analogy. There was a song that was popular a few years ago in Christian circles. In fact, it was sung oftentimes in Russian when we were in Russia as well. It used the analogy of a rose trampled on the ground to try to convey the sacrifice of Christ. Now, I understand it is poetic, and the song really was a beautiful song that I enjoyed hearing. But I have to say that I found that analogy was just too far off. To me, it actually seemed offensive, though I am sure no offense was intended by it. Sure, a rose trampled on the ground seems like a waste of something beautiful, but you can buy a rose for a couple of bucks at the store. Not so with the Son of God. He is of infinite worth and beauty, and his willing sacrifice makes it all the more beautiful and costly. But it wasn't a waste. Christ's sacrifice paid the adoption of all of the sons and daughters of God for all of time, lasting into eternity. That's an immense amount of things that were purchased by his blood. Christmas is the glorious beginning of the redemptive and adoptive work of Christ in the flesh. Let's celebrate that together this week.